Hello, everyone. My name is MikroTik Mark with Admiral Platform, where we help network operators all over the world better operate their MikroTik networks with our visibility, control, and automation tools. In this video today, we'll be talking about the entire Admiral Platform dashboard, walking through all of the features in a complete walkthrough. So sit down, relax, grab some coffee, and let's get started. First off, Admiral has services in the United States, Africa, Europe, Japan, and Latin America, so pick the region that's best for you. To get a new account, you should check out our Getting Started video, and you run through this registration process where you'll fill out the form, you'll get an email to activate your account, and you can log into the dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and log into the dashboard, and you'll notice that I get prompted for two-factor authentication. Our platform has a lot of power and functionality inside of it, so we make sure to protect that with two-factor authentication, and we take security very seriously. So we've also got hardened firewall rules and unique and randomized usernames, passwords, and VPN credentials for every single MikroTik. So now that I'm logged into my dashboard, some of my customers will leave this screen up on their NOC big screen, and what it allows you to do is take an overall look at the health and status of my general MikroTik network. Each of the panes on this page will refresh about every minute, and you can zoom in on a couple of them. So you can see I have my donut here that shows me what the status of my online, offline, and permissions issues routers are. Permissions issues means that we know that the router is online, but during the most recent polling cycle, we were not able to connect to the MikroTik to verify services. There's an alerts view here that you can go on the big screen, and this guy will refresh every minute to give me new alerts and alarms. Additionally, I can take a large look at the map view, and in the same way, each of the dots here I can zoom in, and these dots will refresh every minute and let me know if any new locations are going online or offline. Finally, the section at the bottom here will refresh every minute and cycle through my favorite routers so that I can get a good sense of whether I'm passing traffic on my important infrastructure. Now let's get into some of the centralization features of Admiral Platform. And starting off with our router list, you'll notice a whole bunch of tabs across the top, and we'll dive into each of these. But first off, I want to mention that we track a lot of things on the MikroTik. The model number, the serial number, MAC address, system identity, IP addresses, as well as any notes that you put into your system. So you'll see there, I can instantly pare down and get to the MikroTiks that I want to get to very quickly by using search and sort functionality. In addition, we use tags to allow you to filter your MikroTiks by clicking the filter button here. So I can easily go and say, show me all of my core MikroTiks or all of my core MikroTiks that are in Georgia. One little trick you may not know about is that you can double click on the name of the MikroTik here to quickly update its nickname or add a note so that it's searchable. Each of the columns here is searchable and sortable, so I can easily filter by name or I can sort by online. A useful thing to do by sorting by online will allow me to see which MikroTiks have gone offline most recently, and I can also check to see when were they last connected to the system. So I could also decide to display my MikroTiks that are on the oldest firmware or the highest CPU. Next up, let's take a look at some of the actions we can do with the buttons over here. The first icon is the heart, which is router health, and we're going to dive into that pretty deeply in a few minutes. So I'm going to skip that one for now, and the next button is to run a speed test. I can select a speed test here, and if I have multiple endpoints to speed test to on my deployment, I can select those from the drop-down box here. Otherwise, I could just select some of the speed test settings, hit run speed test, and within a few seconds, I will have a speed measurement of the capacity of this connection to this MikroTik. Once the speed test is complete, you'll have a good indicator of what the capacity of the connection is to that MikroTik, as well as its current latency to our servers. Anytime you'd like to take a look at what your speed test results have been historically, you can do that under Reports, Speed Test History. So heading back to the router listing, the next icon available is the subscriber dashboard icon. I'm going to select one of my units with Wi-Fi to give you a little more detail. One of the things that you can do with Admiral Platform is give your end user a safe-to-use dashboard that's intuitive and easy to use. You can invite your subscriber to manage their own MikroTik by putting their email here, and they'll receive an invite from our system that they can click the activation link on the email, and they'll be invited to manage this MikroTik. You can invite an individual email address to manage multiple MikroTiks, or you can invite multiple users to manage an individual MikroTik. Let's take a look at how the subscriber's view appears in a browser. As the subscriber logs into their dashboard, you'll notice that they can only do some very safe and easy to use options, such as take a look at their bandwidth usage overall, take a look at previously run speed tests, manage some parental controls, and take a look at the Wi-Fi network. We can see what's currently connected to the Wi-Fi, which ones use the most amount of bandwidth, and also check out the SSID and passphrase of our networks. One potential use case that I use for my Wi-Fi is that you'll see I've made a user called Gaming Systems. And if I manage that Gaming Systems user account, the reason that I made it is so that when the kids get a new game download on the Xbox or Switch, that device can no longer take the entire bandwidth of my available connection. I have a rate limit set on them, so they can only use 7 megs at a time, which would prevent that Switch or Xbox from taking the entire bandwidth for the entire house for an hour while the game is being downloaded. In addition, for the user Evan, for example, I've set a schedule so that his devices go to bed at bedtime and can no longer connect to the internet. Here I've adjusted the view to emulate an iPhone, and you'll notice that it looks great. If we go back to the admin dashboard, you'll notice that there's a couple other options down here. First off, I could set a bandwidth limitation that would install a queue to the MikroTik router and enforce that the bandwidth limits would be set for whatever device limit that you specify here. So for example, if I wanted this device to be a 150 meg by 10 meg connection, I could update this limit and the MikroTik would install a queue that enforces that rate limit. Next up, across the top, we have a couple of menu items here that we can go into. So we'll start with backups. Our system takes a backup every day, and one of the things you can do is take a look at the icons over here to see whether our backups have been successful or not in the last day. Anytime you'd like to view your backups, you can click on the icon of storage and take a look at your backup for that MikroTik. I can view it in my browser. I can click this link to download the backup to my local computer. I can copy any parts of the backup that I'd like to, as well as I can compare the configuration now to a long time ago and get highlighted differences in any of the configuration changes, making it easy to restore a previously configured item to the way it was before. If you want to search your backups, you can type in a string here and hit search. Next up is our firmware management tool. There's another video for firmware management that we'll link in the section below. Here's a couple of use cases you may find helpful for managing your firmware. Maybe I want to start by sorting by the oldest firmware and selecting these routers to perform an update. Once you've selected the routers you'd like to update, hit Schedule Update, and you'll be able to choose from the latest available, version 7 or version 6, depending on which firmwares are enabled for your company. We'll go into the admin settings of company firmware later on. If you select latest available, the MikroTik will update to whatever's available on MikroTik's website as the latest version. If you select one of the other versions, the update will occur from a cached version that's on the Admiral platform. Next up, you choose your upgrade time, which could be now, or I can select any time in the future. So for example, I can say Sunday night at 2 a.m. Let's perform this upgrade and submit. Now at 2 a.m. on Sunday, Each of these MikroTiks will run through and update their system packages, and if the system package upgrade is complete successfully, they will update the system router board upgrade and reboot again. All firmware updates are tracked in the logs that you can see on the yellow icon here, as well as in reports. I can look at firmware history. If any MikroTik fails its firmware update, you'll have an icon here that says Update Error that you can take a look at to hover on for more information. If you've scheduled updates and you decide that something else is going on and you want to remove that schedule, just hit the Remove All Scheduled Updates. Our next tool in the router list is called Fleet Commander. There's a Fleet Commander video how-to guide in the comments section. You should take a look at that for more detailed use cases, but this tool is commonly used to do something like update firewall rules, add address lists, or change a simple setting, or query and get a report. You can save jobs and select from previously run jobs, or create a new one here and hit the save so that you can run it again later. In the text box here, you can enter any command or set of commands separated by semicolons that you'd like to execute one by one on your MikroTiks. So for example, if I wanted to add a firewall update to all of my MikroTiks, I would put the command for the firewall update in this box, select all MikroTiks, and hit Run Command. All of the output from the MikroTiks are available in the logs. If I wanted to look at the output that the MikroTiks told our system, I can click on the View Logs, and you'll see I have output from every MikroTik with a header of which router it was, and all of the detailed output from the command that was reported. So for example, if I wanted to find all MikroTiks that had VLAN 100 on them, it would be very easy to create that report from this data. Next up is the Security tab. We intend to do some work on this over the 2025 year. It may not look like it looks like in this demo. But for now, here are the sections of the Security section. If you turn on Allow Testing, once per day, we will try to log into the MikroTik with the admin and no password. And if that succeeds, you will see an icon warning and a dashboard alarm trigger that says admin with no password is enabled on that MikroTik. There's a handful of other icons that may pop up here that are indicative of a potential exploit or an exploit being found on the MikroTik. So take a look for the warnings, and you can sort by this and see if any of your MikroTiks have any warnings on them. Other significant items that are checked for are safe mode being stuck on. So in one case, a customer had safe mode stuck on a core router, and when the router rebooted, it lost a whole bunch of configuration because safe mode had been left on and stuck. Fortunately, they had Admiral platform to go take a look at the backups, compare today to a long time ago, and easily able to copy and paste to restore the functionality. Next up is our Login Manager feature. Login Manager uses the user manager functionality in the MikroTik backend on our servers in order to store users and passwords for access to your MikroTik logins. The way this works is that you can quickly and easily add a user here. So if I've hired a new contractor, hired a new employee, or would like to give access to some new individual, I can add a user account using this Add User functionality, and they instantly have access to all of the MikroTiks that are active at the bottom. With that user account, they would be able to use SSH, Webfig, and WinBox. If you're going to use Login Manager with our dashboard, the best thing to do is just turn Activate All on. And then when the system connects to our service for the first time, it'll automatically enable all the Radius users at the top to be able to communicate with that MikroTik for login services. You'll notice that each MikroTik has its own settings, so if I wanted to switch this full access login to a read-only login, I just click the button to switch that. And if I wanted to turn MikroTik management off for login management on this MikroTik, I can easily just hit deactivate. And I can also turn it back on with the click of a button. Now I'll show an example of the remote access functionality of the dashboard. First off, I'm going to log into this MeshLab 1 MikroTik, which does not have a public IP on it. It's behind double NAT. And you'll notice that if I use my credentials here, I can connect to that MikroTik. And if we take a look here, you'll see some 10 addresses, 172 and 192.168. There's no public IP here, so this access went through our server platform, so I can have remote access to any MikroTik behind any number of layers of NAT. So now I'm going to add a test user with a test password and show how easy it is to gain access remotely to any of my MikroTik deployment. I'll enter that credential, and you see I've regained access to this MikroTik using the Login Manager functionality. If I go to System Users, you'll see that there is no test user account on the MikroTik itself. This authenticated through the backend on our Radius functionality. In a similar way, if I need to revoke any access, I can very quickly and easily update the password or hit delete on that user account, and you'll notice that they instantly no longer have access to that MikroTik. As long as we're talking about remote access functionality, I'll show you here under Account Security. These are all of the IP addresses in the world that are allowed to talk to my deployment. I happen to know that this IP address is where I'm at right now, so if I hit the X on that, the system will now purge that IP address from all of our VPN concentrators and block that IP in the firewall so that it no longer has access to any of my MikroTiks. Once you get the green light that IP has been removed, one thing you'll notice is that if we head back to the router list, I have a new banner icon at the top that says, "The browser IP detected for this session to my website is not allowed to be able to connect to my MikroTiks and Admiral platform." So now if I try to connect to the remote access again, you'll notice I was firewall blocked because, again, the IP address of this computer's session is no longer firewall allowed to talk to my deployment anymore. The use case here is that if I'm on the go and I head to the coffee shop, a conference, or a hotel, and it has a different IP than what's allowed in my platform, I can very quickly and easily log into my dashboard, authenticate with my two-factor, click the Fix It button, and I have regained access remotely to all of my MikroTiks. You'll notice now I get the wrong username and password, and if I put in a proper credential or add that user account again to Login Manager, I regain access to my MikroTiks remotely. As long as we're talking about remote access, I'm going to quickly show the router health section of WebSSH, which allows me to, within seconds, get a command line prompt where I can run command line commands and take a look at troubleshooting and helping this MikroTik remotely. You'll notice I have full console access, and this may be concerning that you may not want all users of the Admiral platform to be able to have this functionality. Don't worry, we've got your back. You'll notice that under the Users Manager, which we'll go into in a little while, there are groups and permissions, and one of those permissions is WebSSH. So you can turn that off for your user accounts that you would not like to be able to access WebSSH. To continue on the remote access functionality, my green wrench icon here will take me to the Edit Router function of the configuration in Admiral Dashboard. And one of the things that you can do here is gain additional remote access. The additional remote access is explained in another video that you can find in the comments for additional remote access. I'll quickly show how you can use the additional remote access port to get access to something like Webfig. If I change this port to 80 and hit update, I now have a URL to connect to Webfig. And in a more advanced setting, what I can do is update this to a random arbitrary port. I'm going to pick 9090, hit update, take an additional step here of heading over to Extras, port forwarding. I will add a port forward that sends 9090 to 443. And I can check on my MAC table here, but I actually want to connect to a very particular IP. 1.254 happens to be my Fiber ONT's user interface. So I'll select here my VPN 5 connection. Yours will be different. Hit submit here, and I got successfully added the port forward. So now I can grab my additional remote access. So I'll just paste that URL into my browser, and I get access to my upstream router's UI. Quick and easy way to gain access to a non-MikroTik device that's nearby your MikroTik device. And this could be used for web UI, SSH, database connection, really anything that you want to get remote access to. Some of my customers use it for a voice server or a security system. Back to our Edit Routers section of Router Health here. Starting at the top, this icon is telling our system to rediscover the MikroTik, which means that it will check to see if any MAC addresses, SSIDs, settings on the MikroTik have changed and since the last time it was communicated with. On the right-hand side, you have an uptime indicator. So these will turn yellow and red depending on the connectivity for that day. It's a last 30 days tracking of the health and status of the MikroTik. Under More Info, our service will talk to the MikroTik in real time and ask it for its current settings here. If you're talking to an LTE MikroTik, you'll have additional data here. Other parts of Edit Router allow me to adjust the nickname, choose new tags, update the notes, add an address or lat-long location for our map, as well as turn on settings. We've already looked at the additional remote access port. The online-offline notifications will send an alert message when the router either goes online or offline. Online-offline notifications functionality will send you an alert when the MikroTik always goes down or when it's offline for more than a minute. If you find that your MikroTik has micro outages where it's down for just a fraction of a second or perhaps a couple of seconds, like is common in LTE MikroTiks, you probably want to set this to more than 1 minute. You can get alerts by email by default, or if you set it up, as we'll show later, you can get those alerts on Telegram, Slack, or SMS. Config Update email notifications will send you a summary email once per day with any configuration changes that occurred on that MikroTik in the last 24 hours. IP pool notifications will let you know if your DHCP lease pools are running short. Security notifications will alert you if that admin no password or if safe mode is stuck on. Interface notifications will let you know when speed or duplex changes, or for example, if you have SFP light levels change by more than 30%, this is a great way to know when you're having errors on interfaces or when things are unhealthy on an interface setting. Again, these are all things that you probably want on for infrastructure routers, but maybe not so much for customer-facing routers. If you mark a MikroTik as a favorite, you'll see it on the dashboard as one of the panels that cycles through and allows you to see it in your knock view, and it auto-refreshes that once per minute. If it's useful for you to set a custom billing date, that's available here, and this will line up with your billing date for graphs and charts. If you run a management network where there are private addresses that MikroTiks can reach each other on, you can enable the management IP address by putting that IP address here, and what that unlocks is the availability to run speed tests from any MikroTik to any other MikroTik over the management network, instead of having a dedicated speed test headend for your deployment. Finally, VPN Health Check allows for your MikroTik to load a script that if the VPN tunnel ever goes stale, it will automatically try and reestablish the tunnel. Keep in mind, there's a VPN Health Check all that can be enabled in the admin settings. Let's take a look at some more of the functionality of Router Health. So one of the things that can be useful is to take a look at the historical bandwidth of the MikroTik. And you can take a look at the day, the week, the month, or the year. And one of the things I like to do is click on Live View, which will start logging into the MikroTik once per second and MikroTik with customer devices, it can be helpful to scroll down to the bottom here where we can see which things are connected to the Wi-Fi right now as we speak, as well as the All Devices view here that will show me which devices consume the most bandwidth on the network. If we switch back to the analysis of individual device view, you'll see here that we track signal strength and the rates of each device as well as bandwidth historically. So very easy for me to see, for example, if at a certain time of the day signal strength gets really poor, I might be able to know that we need to add additional access points. Finally, this section here called Load Extra Data will be context sensitive. So for example, on this MikroTik that has multiple CPUs, sensors, fan speeds, current on power supplies, etc., we have a lot of additional information. On a MikroTik that doesn't have additional sensors, that more info will not show very much. And if it's LTE MikroTik, you'll be able to see the LTE historical data as well to track on how the, for example, RSRQ and quality of the LTE network is over time. Under wireless, you'll see each of the SSIDs that are and radios that are currently active. You can update their SSID and passphrase, as well as change frequency and channel settings if you'd like to. I can also see which devices are attached to it right now. Scrolling down to look at Wi-Fi scan, I can scan the Wi-Fi and take a look at what the 2.4 and 5 gig on this particular MikroTik nearby SSIDs and power levels are. So here I can get a good idea if I want to move this MikroTik to a different frequency or channel, what might be a good selection. The airtime scanner does a similar thing, except it listens to the network for a minute, will disconnect all currently connected devices, customer client devices, but it will listen to the network and give a report of which frequencies are the most used in airtime. So it's pretty nice to gain some insight into which frequencies are using the most amount of airtime. You can see that on the 2.4 gig in this environment, we have a couple of nearby devices that are using up some frequency, but on the 5 gig network, it's very quiet and not a very noisy area for this particular unit. Next up is our timeline view, where we can display all of the things that have happened on a MikroTik that are relevant over time. Stuff like interface changes, parental controls, online-offline events, and other events will show up here. We already talked about edit, backups, and WebSSH and subscriber, so let's take a look at what's in some of the extras. First off, API input can be a helpful troubleshooting tool and allows you to put in an API command like IP address print, and you'd get the output right here in JSON format. The next tool available in extras is Wake on LAN, where you can select a bridge, pick a MAC address, or click on the device you'd like to send a Wake on LAN packet to, hit send, and our system will send a Wake on LAN packet to wake that device up. The use case here is that if you've got a TV that goes offline commonly because of a power outage, you can send it a Wake on LAN packet and that TV will come back online. The configuration is available here in case you need to restore the configuration after replacing the MikroTik from backup. And finally, port forward. We took a look at earlier during the additional remote access, but you can see here it's just an easy way to select a device from my LAN or type in its IP. I can select the in interface as well as do a port translation if I'd like to, and by hitting submit, I can view as well as add new port forwards to my MikroTik. The tags section is where I can add new tags to my MikroTiks. The way that I adjust existing tags is by heading to the router list, and adding a new tag to any MikroTik is as easy as clicking this filter icon and then picking a new tag that I'd like to add to that MikroTik and hitting Save Tags. I can adjust these very quickly and easily by just selecting my tags that I would like, and hitting Save Tags. Our Feature Request UI allows you to take a look at all of the feature requests that are currently suggested by other users all around the world and vote on whichever features you'd like to see built next. Under Hierarchy, you can hit the Auto Build button, which will scan through the MikroTiks and find out which ones are connected to each other. You'll notice here that on my lab network, most of the MikroTiks exist under the 4011 MikroTik. I can see which ones have children here and which ones are at the end of the tree leaf hierarchy. After doing an auto build, you can use our topology mapper to visualize what your network looks like and how they're connected to each other. OSPF mapper is a similar functionality, except that you hit the Update OSPF Routers button instead of Auto Build under Hierarchy, and this will scan any MikroTiks that are configured for OSPF and draw a map based on their current configuration. If you have BGP routers, the BGP peer info will display info about your BGP peerings. Next up is admin settings. The Enable Customer Support email allows you to customize the end user invite that we talked about early on in the subscriber view to come from this email instead of from Admiral Platform's email. The Enable End User to change Wi-Fi SSID and passphrase can be turned off if you would like your end user who's using the subscriber Compass Wi-Fi feature set to not be able to update their SSID or password. In a similar way, you can allow them to manage their own guest Wi-Fi, parental controls, rate limits, and frequencies in case you want to disable those functions. Similarly, the end user can use Wake on LAN or Reboot Router. You'll notice here is the enabled VPN health check for all routers that we talked about earlier. If you turn this on, a VPN script will be loaded that tests the MikroTik every 5 minutes connectivity to our dashboard, and if it ever fails, it'll attempt to disable and re-enable the VPN tunnel so that that tunnel can never go stale. Subscriber uptime emails allows for customers who have Compass Wi-Fi feature set enabled for their MikroTik to be able to receive uptime emails on their notifications, as well as when you schedule a firmware update, we can email them that a firmware update is coming soon, so they should expect to have a reboot on their MikroTik. Some customers noted that UDP speed tests either overflowed connections or reported inaccurate results, so the Enable TCP only functionality is here, where you can say TCP will always be used for speed tests. And finally, Enable Login Manager is available if you'd like to remove the Login Manager functionality from the dashboard over here on this tab. That tab can be taken away if you disable the Login Manager functionality in the admin settings. Next up is our platform credentials. Here we can turn on PowerCode, Sonar, or Twilio integration. And the way this works is that you pick your integration you'd like to add, fill in your details, hit update, and you'll be able to leverage Twilio, for example, to send SMS messages to you when events like online or interface changes occur on your MikroTik. Admin notifications is a way to do bulk management of notifications on your MikroTiks. So for example, if I decided I'd want notifications to be turned on for all interfaces, I can enable interface notifications on all my MikroTiks in one step. And if I wanted to turn off notifications for IP pools for all my MikroTiks, I can just disable here. Just a quick and easy way to do a bulk notification update for all my MikroTiks. Otherwise, I have to go into each MikroTik under the Router Health Edit section, and I can turn on each of the sliders here. Next up is our Slack notifications section. There's detailed directions on how to implement your Slack notifications here. Next up is our API settings. You can take a look at our API guide by clicking on this link, and this is where you can see how to use our API to integrate with your use cases and flows. Next up is admin firmware, where you can see which firmwares have been downloaded to your Admiral cache. You can also select to download any new version here by clicking the button all the way on the right, which will download it to the local cache on the MikroTik service. And then if you want to enable your deployment to be able to use that version, hit the Enable Firmware slider, and you'll instantly be able to select that version when doing the firmware update from that UI. Note that only admin accounts have access to the admin settings, so only admins can choose which firmwares are available for other employees to use. Finally, the import tool is a new functionality for adding MikroTiks that either have a public IP address on them, or if you have a dedicated on-premise deployment, this is what you would use to import a subnet of MikroTiks. With the import tool, you can use a wizard to go next by putting in your IP or subnet, username, and password. And if the Admiral platform can talk to your MikroTik, it'll allow you to import it automatically. Dashboard users is where you'll see all of the users for access to your MikroTik deployment. When you want to add a new user, just click Add User, fill out the form, pick their group that they belong to, and hit Submit. Speaking of groups, you can adjust each group's permissions by coming to the Groups and Permissions, hitting Edit, and selecting what they have access to. My customer service group, for example, has read-only access to the dashboard, no access to any of the powerful tools like Backups, Login Manager, Fleet Commander, and WebSSH. But they do have access to the dashboard, can update firmware, look at reports, and see whether that MikroTik is passing traffic by looking at the historical and real-time graphs. Finally, the subscriber end users dashboard allows you to take a look at which customers have access to the Compass Wi-Fi feature set, which is that read-only dashboard that we looked at earlier. I can disable or remove their accounts from here, as well as take a look at them, edit their settings, or reset user account logins. If you'd like to work with a customer or a user, same thing happens on your dashboard users here, reset logins. If they've been locked out of their account by too many invalid password attempts, you can reset their login here. Next up is reports. We've already covered firmware history and speed test history and part of router history, which is where each MikroTik has its own history. Router history has the entire history for all MikroTiks, so you can come here and take a look and see if some event may have occurred where all the timestamps line up simultaneously. Task status is where you can take a look at some of the auto build for hierarchy, firmware management, and routing. The last report we have is top talkers. Here we can see which devices use the most bandwidth on your network. We took a look at the import tool a minute ago to see how to import MikroTiks either with a public IP or on-prem. And one of the things that you may want to be wondering is, how do I add a router? We have another video for how to get started with the dashboard linked in the comments there. But here's how you can add a router quickly and easily to your dashboard. The only required field here is the nickname. Everything else is optional. If I've modified the default port for WinBox, you can enter that here. Our system uses API and SSH for all of the functionality you see here, so we typically turn that on as part of the configuration. If you'd like our dashboard to not have full access and read access instead, everything will work except for Fleet Commander and Firmware Management. You can enable the additional remote access port right here on the fly, add tags, set some of your notifications and address lat-long data as well as notes, and hit submit. But keep in mind you can always edit this data later as well. Once hitting submit, our backend will generate a router and unique configuration for one individual MikroTik. And now I can use the paper icon over here to copy that configuration, head into a terminal window on the MikroTik itself, right-click and paste. And within a minute, it will join our dashboard and be part of your deployment. You can find your profile by pointing up here to your name, and there's a little icon that allows you to select your profile. In the same menu, you can click to get to our documentation, our changelog, how to get support, and to sign out of your account. So if we head over to profile, Inside of here is where we can set some information that can help us get better use out of the platform. So first off, you can see some settings here. I can hit edit here and I can change some of my information. Most importantly here, if you enable the Twilio additional admin setting platform credential, then you can send text messages to your phone. So in here, you'll have to put your phone number and country code, and then Twilio can leverage that to send you text messages if you've opted in for those kind of text messages. There's a couple of other settings here: default router sort. There's a light theme, dark theme, and terminal theme. I'll switch to terminal here just to show you how that looks. And color setting is for some additional color sensitive or color blind folks to be able to tweak and tune some of those items in the dashboard. But if I switch to terminal mode, you'll see here that my UI now shows a terminal mode capability. For demos, I like to use light mode, so we'll switch that back here. Next up is notifications. We took a look at this earlier, but just to reiterate, this is where you can put in your Telegram username, as well as, for example, turn on SMS notifications for SMS notifications for each type of alert here. You'll notice that I can't click on this if I don't have a Twilio integration. So if you're here and it's grayed out, that means that you need to enable a Twilio integration first so that our system can send you text messages. Change password is where you can update your password. Manage subscriptions. If this shows up for you, that means your administrative access allows you to manage the subscription. If you need to change your credit card info or other payment details, the billing portal is here. Otherwise, the cancel service button allows you to say, I am terminating my account, and go ahead and remove all of the configurations for my MikroTiks to your platform. Some other items in here are beta program signup. Program signup allows you to say that you'd like to try out the newest Admiral features when they're available. So in order to sign up for that, all you have to do is hit I agree to give feedback, sign up, and your dashboard will refresh, unlocking the beta features options. Currently, as of now, there's a little bit of beta features here for adding your own Speedtest server, doing a support chatbot, and Radar, which is our MDU Wi-Fi functionality where you can pick several MikroTiks, Wi-Fi scan them all nearly simultaneously, and get the results in a unified UI where you can adjust power levels and frequencies to get the desired performance and reduce as much congestion as possible using our platform. Under two-factor app authentication, if this is turned off on your account, you have to click it, log out, log back in for it to generate the two-factor QR code. But once this QR code's been generated, you can go into your two-factor auth, such as Authy, Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, etc. Scan this QR code, and once you put in the code that links it to your account, you can register it with the two-factor app, and then you can use your two-factor app to log in for two-factor when signing into the dashboard. Finally, there's language switcher available here. We have English and Spanish translations as of now. We expect to extend this functionality and add more languages soon. I hope you've enjoyed this demo walkthrough of the Admiral platform for centralized MikroTik management. We've got lots of other videos in our YouTube channel, so check that out. Have a great day and keep routing the world.